County. The opinions expressed in the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
Hi, and welcome to Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. My guests today on the show are Chief Craig Ambrose and Special Constable Jason Cranny of the Owen Sound Police Service. And we're going to be talking about some of the changes, some things you just might not know about our Owen Sound Police Service, and talk about, I guess I almost call it the state of the community. So, Chief, Jason, welcome. Good to have you both here.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks very much.
Now, I should explain very briefly, you two are sitting in the boardroom at the Owen Sound Police Services. And the fact that you've got a boardroom suggests that, hey, you've got a board.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're separate from council. We're in a separate entity, and we're governed by a board as outlined and mandated on the Police Services Act. And that governance policy obviously keeps a lid on me, and so that I don't have the ultimate say on everything that happens. And similarly, it limits the potential political interference because it's not controlled by politicians either. It's controlled by a board that's appointed. We have a 5-member board to the size of our community, and that's 2 provincial appointees that are members who have indicated an interest in policing in the community, and they've responded to a call from the provincial appointments group, and they have an interest, and they've been appointed by the province for a term, usually 3 years, and it's renewable. And then there are also 2 council representatives on the board, so council has their input and their say. And then obviously that means that there's no balance of power to anybody. And the 5th individual that's appointed is a community representative that's appointed by council. So that's somebody who, much like community representatives on any of the boards in the city, art gallery or Tom Thompson or any library, anything like that, they're somebody who's expressed an interest in live in the community and get involved and help out on those boards. So that person is not necessarily associated to the politics of council, and nor are they tied into the politics of the province. So that balances out the governance. And they're responsible for a number of things, including hiring and firing and management of the chief and my role, as well as they're responsible for, as everybody is concerned, cost of policing and making sure that the budget is justifiable and it meets the adequate and effective level of service for the community. And then that board approved budget is then what goes to council, and council has an overall okay or say as to whether or not they approve the police budget the way it is, or whether they have concerns or questions. They aren't able to go line by line and analyze how that money is being spent. They just have to look at it as an overall total package to say, yes, we agree, or no, we don't agree, and as to the policing costs. So that's the basic 5-minute introduction to police governance for the province of Ontario.
And that's really helpful because there's a lot of myths, I guess, and misunderstandings about how our police services are governed. I believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe the 2 city council representatives are the mayor and Councillor Kukreja. That Councillor Kukreja was appointed at the last council meeting. I believe Mayor Body is also the other rep.
Yes, that's correct. So Mayor Body has the option of participating as the mayor on council, or to designate that authority to one of the other council members, and the mayor sits on the police services board police services board, pardon me, and then Councillor Kukreja was appointed for the first 2-year session of the 4-year council session. And it seems that in order for everybody to get an opportunity and get some experience, they put a 2-year position in place so that there's an ability for everybody to understand their roles and their roles on policing. The board meets monthly, other than in the summer months, and also they meet outside of that if there's a demand or a need. And one of the things that they're also responsible for is that I am not the employer, the board is the employer. So if there's any resolutions or anything that can't be resolved between the employees and their representation through their association and the police chief, or if it goes beyond a level of a police chief where it has to do with the contract and things like that, then it's the board that negotiates with the police members and not the police chief. I'm obviously there to provide input and advice and to provide the operational background to the board members who may not have that. But ultimately, they're the ones that negotiate contracts and do all that work on behalf of the community as well. So
I think it's also worth mentioning that the model of governance, the way our police services are governed, is very similar, if not identical, to city council and the city. And it's the only employee of the city council is the city manager. The same is true of the Board of Health. The only employee of the Board of Health is the medical officer of health. This is not an uncommon and well, actually, the county. The only employee of the county is the CAO, I believe. So it's not an unusual situation or governance model. In fact, it's very common. We just don't realize it.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm I'm hired by the board, and I'm the employee of the police service appointed by the board. Yep. And everybody else is arm's length from that. And certainly the board, in their governance, there's legislation in place so that they don't get into the operational ongoing minutia of the board. That's my role and responsibility, and I report to them. But there is legislation there that they can't direct an officer, they can't direct an investigation, all of those things. There's simply oversight, and it's up to me to keep them informed and aware of what's going on within the police service. But my role is the operational day-to-day, getting involved and knowing the police side of things.
Yeah, I think it's a very useful understanding for all of us to have, that this is the model of governance that is very common across our lower tier and upper tier municipalities, as well as our police services boards. And does this, just because I know we've got viewers outside of Owen Sound, do municipalities that have OPP contracts also have a police services board as well?
So yes and no. It's not the exact same format. It's not the exact same structure, but they do have advisory boards under Section 10 of the Police Services Act, as opposed to the municipal services that have police services boards. And those are responsible to report. They have basically a board with the divisional commander of the local detachment, and they don't have the same input and the same level, because obviously it's a much larger organization, and they're not going to be a commissioner, and they're not responsible for hiring a commissioner and things like that. But they certainly have input into policing within their community through their local Section 10 boards.
Sure. Well, it's really important. I think we understand how we're governed. And that's been one of the kind of key themes I've tried to bring forward. So I appreciate the clarity around our police services, which is very helpful, Chief. Now, Jason, you've been kind of sitting there catching your breath, because you ran in here, sat down, and said, "I was up at Hillcrest."
I was, and so yeah, it was actually nice that I maybe didn't have the first question, because I was catching my breath, and I kind of gave Chief the heads up that I would be kind of coming in just kind of under the wire. I was up at Hillcrest, and I'm up at Hillcrest all week this week, and we have a whole myriad of things happening today. So I'm kind of bouncing around from different spot to different spot, which is great. I mean, being busy is part of my role, and that's why I love about it the most. So I have caught my breath, and I'm ready to roll.
Okay, you're not a constable. You're a special constable who is a civilian employee of the Owen Sound Police Service.
Correct. Yeah, that's correct.
So what's your job? What do you do?
So my job, I do a lot of the education and awareness piece with the community. I do a lot of the community outreach, and I liaise a lot with our frontline officers, our civilians, the chief and the inspectors, and as well as our community members. And really, it's we just talked about some of that miscommunication, or that misunderstanding about what policing actually is in Owen Sound, or anywhere really. About calls for service, the call volume, what officers actually do, what do they do in dispatch, some of those things, if things actually do come up, I'm out in the community and I can help answer those. Obviously, the chief would be the best, and so would the inspectors to answer them, from their perspective. But just on a layperson perspective in conversation, or if I'm doing presentations and people want to ask questions, the whole part of the service, when possible, is to be as transparent as possible, and that's part of my role, is to educate and make them aware of what we do and why we do it on an ongoing basis.
And I'm sure that if you don't have the answer to a question, you can get it quite quickly.
Yeah, and that is a benefit of having we're a small service. If you're from Grey Bruce, you might actually think we're a large service, but in the broader scale of things, we're not a large service. We would probably be, Chief could certainly jump in here, but probably a medium to small service. We would be a larger service just because of our civilian members, and we have that unique part of having a communication center where a lot of other smaller police services wouldn't have that. So as far as employability, we may have some more, but realistically, it's a city of 22,000 people, so it's not large in the broad scheme of things.
Right. Now, do you do patrol work, or do you just anything like that? Do you do active work with the officers?
So I go out on I'll go out on some calls. I'll do some ride-alongs with the officers, but for the most part, when I was hired to do this job, it was really to do that education and awareness piece, to liaise with the community, and to also give that policing perspective from people that may not always want to call the police or may not feel that they need to, but there's lots of things that they need to be aware of, or there are things that are happening in their home or in their neighborhood that they don't realize are actually police-related matters. And they really deserve to have that information and to have that connectability and to ask those questions. And again, if I don't have the answers, like I said, having a smaller police service is really unique in that I can, pick up the phone and call or call the chief, and if I don't have the answers, and he's really good to pick up and answer and help me through that, or the inspectors or any of the officers, sergeants, you name it. It really is a small group.
So what would be
a good example, Jason, of something that someone didn't think was a police matter, but after they talked to you, you realized that, hey, this is a police matter?
Discuss the calls from that family.
Yeah. So as an example, we had, and this is going to go back a couple of years ago, and this is where when I came into this role, is taking a different look at the role and how we actually engage and interact with our community. And so, naivety is one of those things that we kind of fall into, because if you feel like you're a good person, you feel like you do good things, and you feel like you deliver good service, that's great. But it's not until someone tells you otherwise where you have to think to yourself, okay, maybe I need to change the way we do things. There's a saying that if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. But we had some families who are moving here from different countries, some war-torn countries and third world countries, and we had a family from Eritrea, a country that I didn't know much about, and we realized after the fact that there was some kind of borderline criminal actions happening in and around their house and in their neighborhood, but they were afraid to call us because where they're from, police are corrupt, the political landscape isn't healthy, and they are a family of color. And they honestly felt that they didn't feel comfortable calling us. Well, when we found out about this from their sponsor family, well, it was just like it was an eye opener for us, because not once did we ever think that we weren't engaging or that we weren't open, but from where they were from and their experience, you could certainly see why they would think that. And so changing the way that we interact and deal with this family. So what we did is I went out, I met with this family in plain clothes, along with their sponsor family, at a spot that was comfortable for them in an area that they were comfortable with. And they got to meet me as a person. And they got to ask me questions. I showed up in my community service vehicle. I brought some stuffed animals for the kids, talked a little bit about what I do, why I do it, and talked a little bit about why they need to make these calls to the police so that they can actually feel more safe than they do. And from there, the next time I met with them, I wore my uniform and I met them in their home, so that they were still in a comfortable place for themselves. I showed up, I'm still the same person. I just have my uniform on. Their sponsor family is still involved. And it kind of becomes a bit of a safe handoff, to the point where a couple of years ago, we actually hired an Eritrean boy to work with us as part of our youth summer program. because the best way to tell the story about what actually happens inside here, and to know that it is a good place and there's good people here, is to have somebody from their own community come in and live here, work here, breathe here, and then take that information back. And that's what we did. And so from that moment on, the chief and I had a conversation, and we had agreed that we were going to have a spot for newcomers to come into the station and work as part of that youth program. So we can have that, that transparency, if you will. And so that people do know that they should be calling for things that are illegal, or they should be calling if they're feeling unsafe, and they should be reaching out, and we will come and we will answer, and we will hopefully make them feel more safe than they already are.
Well, Jason, just to follow up briefly, are you following up with other immigrant communities that are beginning to arrive in Grey Bruce and Owen Sound?
So I sit on the Grey Bruce partnership table, and there's a whole bunch of different partners who sit around that table, and we talk about newcomers who are coming to the area. We talk about celebrations that are actually happening, some barriers that could possibly be in the way of some newcomers. And then what each individual organization can actually do, if at all possible, to kind of break down some of those barriers or to give them opportunities. And so we kind of want to be at the forefront of that. And so sitting at that table really has benefited, I think, our service, because we do know when families are coming. We did know when the Ukrainian families were coming to Owen Sound. And we wanted to basically be there in and around the time that they came, because we also knew they're coming from a war-torn country. Mm-hmm. Where military uniforms and possibly police uniforms and people from different countries coming in, it's a scary time. It's an unsafe time. It's a bunch of turmoil, and you have younger families coming here, and many of them just moms and kids. And the one thing you want them to feel is safe. And that's why they're coming to Canada, is to feel safe, because they're in an unsafe environment. And to do that and to break down that barrier, it's to be there on their comforting space in their home, with people who they have already met or know, or might be from their country or speak their language. And that's what we did. So when the Ukrainian families came, I was actually arrived at their place the very same day that they arrived. I had a backpack full of stuff to hand out to the kids with some of my summer students. I came on a bicycle, not on a cruiser, and just introduced them, introduced myself, welcomed them to the community, let them know where the police station was. Let them know that if they needed anything, if they're feeling unsafe, to feel free to give us a call. We'd pop in and say hi, and vice versa. And I'd like to say we broke down those barriers before the barriers were even put up. And again, we just hired a young Ukrainian girl 3 weeks ago as part of our Youth and Policing Initiative. And she'll actually be with us tonight at our police academy. So,
right. Well, Chief, I wanted to come back to you, because one of the other things I noticed, there was been a few pictures on social media of you attending some of the events, I think on Truth and Reconciliation Day, and there's been, there is an intent on the part of the police service to reach out to the Indigenous community in Owen Sound, which is quite interesting and quite remarkable. Yeah,
so that's one area that I've been doing for a number of years in a policing role. Prior to coming to Owen Sound, I was a primary liaison in my other service, and when I arrived here, I obviously wanted to continue on in that and build in it. And with our community being as close as we are to Saugeen Nation and Nawash, it was important for me to try, and Nayashinaming, it was important for me to try and establish that right away. And when I got here, I realized there wasn't any type of relationship, and there wasn't anything formal. So reached out to Mwikwadong, the local friendship center, and started establishing that. And part of, there were a lot of injustices done, and the police were responsible, and the police are the face of some of those political decisions that were made, and still at the pointy end of the stick, so to speak. And so there's a lot of issues and problems, and Truth and Reconciliation came out with a number of recommendations, and some of them were specific to policing. And really, if you're going to take that on, you're going to have to actually make some changes and make some improvements. And it was my goal to actually implement some of the things from the Truth and Reconciliation guidelines. And that relationship has developed, and we started a program with Mwikwadong on cultural mindfulness for first responders. It started out as for first responders, and so we initiated that pilot. I had already been on a 1-week course with an individual who had been teaching that program for the OPP and 15 years ago, and had stayed in touch with him. And so I said, I have the perfect person to come up and bring this to our area, because he has the background in policing. He has as a first responder, 30 plus years. And so, he can share his culture, he can share his knowledge, he can share his experience. And I think it was of real value. So we opened it up to police, first responders, police, fire, and EMS, and to everybody in Grey and Bruce County, to try and improve this. And we're probably one of the leaders and probably one of the first areas that are trying to actually put words to action. And we've hosted either 3 or 4 sessions now, 1-week sessions with 4 sessions a week, bringing George Cucci here to do that work for police, fire, and EMS. But then I feel that our role is more than just for the emergency responders, but it's in the community and to educate the community and to educate for the wrongs. And so that is actually, we've expanded it out to some of our community partners as well. They've had members from CMHA, we've had Grey Bruce Health Sciences, we've had a number of other community groups, and we've opened the sessions to those individuals and the city of Owen Sound. And that really has led to a whole lot more people getting that education and getting that knowledge and awareness, to the point where the cities recognize the value of that. And I think in the time I've been here, there's been quite a bit of change, and they brought the same individual forward to the community to educate the new council when the new council came in. So it started as a grassroots thing within the police service, but it's expanded to much beyond that.
Excuse me. Very interesting to hear that, because, as you said, the police especially have been the doers of wrongs, or at least the face of many wrongs, down through the years around residential schools, and often seen as hindering rather than helping. So perhaps this will help build bridges. But I wanted to kind of riff a little bit off that, because you referred to changes. And I recall you speaking, when you were speaking earlier in another context, you said that there was a big difference in the policing services then and now. Could you outline some of those differences and changes that people would maybe notice, but maybe not notice?
Yeah, so I think policing has changed and evolved, and 33, starting my 34th year earlier this month of policing, it's changed a lot, and how we do our business, how we go about our daily operations, and it's for the better. There were a lot of things that we dealt with when I first started that we'd handle completely different right now, and that's as a result, and unfortunately, it's a result of a number of tragedies and tragic events that have happened. And I'll take one, for instance, is how we handle intimate partner violence and domestic disputes from the 90s till now. And there were tragic events that happened, and then during the breakdown of how did that happen and why did this happen and how did it result, that the police were ineffective, the court system were ineffective, and so changes were made. So now we have specialized investigations, specialized officer training for domestic violence and intimate partner violence situations. We have assigned crowns to look after that. We have review committees that look after any time that there's an issue. And we have mandatory charging, which I think is probably the most significant change, and that's through the Crown, that if we have grounds to proceed with a charge, whether the victim is cooperative or not, we are to lay a charge and make brought forward to the courts, so there's a better control over that. That's just one area, but I think the biggest change those years is the change of the partnerships with other agencies. That resulted from a lot of downloading to police. So as you cut back on mental health funding in the early to mid 90s, and institutionalization of individuals with mental health issues, it created a cost savings, and it moved it from healthcare, but it left a vacancy and it left a void that was filled in by the police. And so the number of calls that we go to for mental health now, because we're that agency of 24/7 response, and we're the only one that you can call at 2 a.m. who's going to have somebody come and deal with your problem, whether that's one of the mandated issues for the police or whether it's just that we're the only ones there. That's our role, that's our job. We've filled that gap. And I think the community partnerships that we've developed and the plans that we do, our mobile mental health and addictions response team, pairing an officer in plain clothes with somebody from the Canadian Mental Health Association to go and respond to those calls and to avoid going to the hospital and doing, spending hours in the emergency department. For those who don't need it, it's better off if we can treat them and we can do an alternative, not just for the healthcare system and the burden that we place on them taking them to the hospital, but the individual who goes to the hospital doesn't need to go to the hospital. That's not the best treatment for them. So the idea is to provide them with the best care. So those are some of the big changes in the drivers. And, there's a lot of talk about the police and whether that's the role of the police. Until somebody else steps in to take that role at 2 a.m, it's, there aren't the alternatives there, and it may not be, but we have trained. They're saying, well, we're not trained to do it. That's not true. We certainly have received extended training. We've done a lot more work on mental health. We've done a lot more work on de-escalation training. We've done a lot more work with our officers, especially. A number of them have taken assist suicide training through CMHA. All those things that if we're going to be the people that are responding to the calls, then we're going to be trained to do it as best we can. We may not have gone to specifically to school to be a mental health worker, but we certainly do our continuing education piece to do the best job we can while it's being left to the police to deal.
One of the big issues in the community is certainly people who are homeless, who choose to live rough, who and I think there's a broad community concern about those who are literally out in the cold, and I think that's been made more clear with the recent death of someone who chose to live out in the cold, not in Owen Sound police territory, and who passed away. What does the police service do in those situations, and what are the resources that you can bring to bear?
So, and there's probably a misconception in the public that there's a lot we can move people along and we can do something, and homelessness isn't a crime and it's not against the law. And one of the things that we've had concerns with and the public is concerned is why is that person there? Arrest that person and get them out of here. Well, there's no powers of arrest. There's no way of dealing with homelessness. It's a social issue. It's not a crime. And so we do have a role. Obviously, we want to make sure that everybody in the community is safe, and that includes the individual who's concerned about the person. But the police of the 1950s, where you say, go and pick them up and move them along and give them a bus ticket or send them somewhere else. That's not happening. And our role now is a supportive role and a connectivity piece with putting them in contact with other community groups and going out and providing support. Our core unit are especially good for that because they're proactive. They don't have to wait for a call for service. They'll know when they'll be interacting and talking to those people. They'll be the ones that are out meeting them if they're living rough and they're in a tent, not necessarily this time of year, but in other months, and specifically in the fall, we'll be going out and we'll be finding those people and doing visits. Jason does it as well, and they'll be taking our partners formerly from YMCA, but now with the Grey County Housing, and we'll be taking them out and just making that connection between the two groups to say, here, this person can offer you accommodations, this person can do that. We can provide them with some support and contacts and make the connection, and hopefully they take advantage of that. Sure.
This is a very good discussion, and we're going to have to continue this, but we got to take a break. So, Chief Jason, we will be right back. Friends, I'm David Shearman. This is Politically Speaking, and yeah, we'll be right back.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
You're watching Rogers TV.
I don't care what the law is. I will never be a slave. That word, I hate it. It rests on my tongue like rot.
Peter, how does it feel to get paid for your work?
There are rumors freedom's coming for us all.
Freedom, you know that's all I want.
Chloe, careful. Real men would rather sell you across the river to America than let you go free.
Then I'll run. I've run before. Maybe this time for good.
Just get her into a boat. No!
Chloe! Chloe, no!
Word of Chloe Cooley's resistance led to Canada's first legislation limiting slavery. After 200 years, slavery was abolished in Canada in 1834.
Piper Post here with me for Knights. Tune in on Fridays at 5 to watch Knights hockey. Alessandro Supino here with Knights hockey. Tune in to Rogers TV 5 o'clock on Friday for the game.
Hi, and welcome back to Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. My guests are Chief Craig Ambrose and Special Constable Jason Cranny of the Owen Sound Police Service. And we're having a really good conversation about things you probably never thought about our police service. Well, Jason, let's turn to you now that the chief has had a bit of time and you've had another bit of a rest.
That's right.
Let's talk to you. Said you were up at Hillcrest School
Yes.
and had been up there for special events. What would you be doing at Hillcrest School?
So right now I'm actually up and I'm working. We're doing an interactive session with grades 7 and 8 students. I just did it at Notre Dame a couple weeks ago. I'm in Hillcrest now, and then I head to East Ridge next, and Alexander after that. And it's an interactive session on social media awareness, making healthy choices, and internet safety. And the reason why I go up to do that, it's not that the teachers can't deliver that kind of content. It's because at the maturation level of the teenage brain, the age at which the students are at, and they're getting very, very close to moving into high school, some of the things that they might have made mistakes for and had principals or vice principals or teachers or even their parents kind of get involved with, because they might not realize the consequences of their actions. As they get older, they start to understand the consequences, or they should. And if they're serious enough in nature, they could become criminal. And unfortunately, sometimes that does happen with some of our high school age students. So we're trying to be as proactive as possible, as interactive as possible, have some fun with it, but it's also serious, and working with the teachers and the students to let them know that the actions that they take can have some serious consequences. So the theme that I talk about, we kind of peel back the onion to let them realize that everybody in their class, everybody in their grade level, they're their peers. And we have like a big piece. You don't have to always like your peers and get along with them, but it's your peer group. And at the very least, it's respecting them and protecting them. And we go through some scenarios where respecting and protecting can go a long way, not only for yourself, and can also help you from any kind of criminal exposure or getting yourself in too much trouble, but also your peer or your friend or someone who you may not like, but you've seen something on social media, or you've been handed something, or something shows up on your phone, and what you do with it can alter the course of your life and their life based on simply a click of the button. And so we slow that down and we walk through scenarios and we talk about how do you make those healthy choices. And if you struggle with that, who can help you along the way? And it doesn't always have to be us, and that's fine. But I'm there to say that, you know, if these continue to spiral and those actions continue to happen, at some point, police will become and get involved. And that's an area that you really don't want. And so excellent student engagement. I really enjoy it. It's probably my most enjoyable part of the job is working with young people and working with them and having some fun and doing the education and awareness piece. And also having those really good, healthy, active dialogues and engaging the teachers in the process.
You get involved in things like sexting or exchanging of pictures and bullying and that kind of those kind of negative behaviors that can become extremely risky.
Yeah, and so in the past, police would go in and we do like a longer session with each. We should be in grade 6 classes, and there's some topic areas that really aren't really police specific, and we shouldn't really be dealing with them. And some of it's on with mental health, and it was on tobacco use. And there's other organizations can better deliver that messaging. However, there's certain things that we should be talking about, stuff like youth in the law, stuff like sexting, social media awareness. the importance of privacy, the importance of your peer group and making those healthy decisions. And bullying, that really should come from an educational point of view. But when bullying becomes to the point where it could become criminal, it could become assaultive, then that definitely certainly slides to the more the policing side. And that's why we kind of straddle that line. We really do want to work with the teachers and the board because they are really the experts in that field. I have a unique background in that I did come from public health and my role was youth engagement. So I've had training and I have led trainings across the province. So it's unique in that regard. So I certainly feel comfortable in the classroom and I certainly feel comfortable delivering these type of messaging. And being interactive is key. Having a talking head at the front of the classroom doesn't work.
Well, the other thing I think advantage you have is you're not mom and dad.
No, and I think that's the other thing. It's not mom and dad, and they can hopefully feel comfortable asking some questions, or at the very least, if they don't feel comfortable asking questions in the classroom, hopefully I've opened up the door that they might feel comfortable asking questions, even if it's with their peers, their teachers, a coach that they like and respect, an aunt, an uncle, even a parent. It doesn't matter. If the door gets open and they start to think about it and they feel that they want to reach out, that's really the ultimate hope. And that if they do want to talk about anything a little bit further and they want to chat with me, happy to meet back in the school somewhere where they're safe to chat about stuff like that.
So basically the goal is to enhance communication, improve the communication between everyone, parents, youth, teachers, school.
That is exactly what it is. And it's also that transparency that it's okay to talk about these topics. In fact, it's important because, I mean, I don't have the stats in front of me, but on average, and if I went into a classroom, which we do today, I actually asked the kids who have their cell phones to stand up. And I'm talking about grade 7s. And so today I did 2 classes, and we were about 90 to 95% have their own cell phones in grade 7. And the number of people who have social media accounts is around 80% in grade 7. So if anything, we're probably getting there maybe a year even too late because they're already engaged now. For the most part, if they have a decent parental relationship, there's parental controls on it, and the parents hopefully have put some privacy settings on their social media accounts, but that's not always the case.
Yeah, that's so important. I saw recently on an internet forum where parents are asking the question, I need to control my kids' internet access and I need the tools. What are they? So parents are asking those questions too, because they do have tools to work with the internet use of their children.
They do. And the thing that's a little bit tricky, and certainly with the 3 of us sitting around, we didn't grow up with social media. So we are trying to catch up to social media, and we will never actually be able to catch up to social media. It's another thing to grow up with it. And so the students themselves can teach me way more than I'll ever teach them about social media. My role is to teach them about, because of the maturation of the brain and not realizing what they're doing, it's no different than drinking underage. There's a reason why there's certain levels, there's certain age limits for drinking and purchasing and using of marijuana and cannabis, or even tobacco use, is basically how the body's formed and what the body can actually take in and process. And so kids don't understand that when they're 13. They're in the experimental phase of their life. So, and that's the same for social media. It's experimenting. It's pushing the boundaries. And my job, hopefully, is to raise a level of awareness, and hopefully to put up some caution signs and to let them think twice before maybe hitting send or talking to someone about maybe posting a message online or sending an inappropriate photo or asking for an inappropriate photo.
Yeah, it's a different world, isn't it?
It is.
Very different world. Well, Chief, let's come back to you. One of the questions that I read when you made a presentation that I referred to earlier, someone asked, what keeps you up at night? What does keep you up at night? Not that you don't sleep well, I'm sure you do, but what's your biggest concern?
It changes. I mean, when I first arrived here, there were some things that kept me up at night, and I've solved those. So, but there's always something else that comes on the radar, and certainly, probably it doesn't keep me up at night. But my biggest fear is one of my employees getting hurt, and that doesn't necessarily mean a physical injury. That means a mental health injury as well. It can be any type of injury, and so one of the things is, how do we keep making sure that we are meeting the needs of our members to make sure that we hit that wellness mark? And and making sure that nobody gets hurt at work. And the ease, I mean, buying a flotation device, a life jacket to put in the cruiser trunk, that's an easy one. It's the measuring and figuring out what type of services can we offer to our members to keep them from having a mental health or PTSD type of disorder. How do I make sure that I have adequate staffing and challenge? It's a challenge in this environment to try and find staff for positions. And I'll do a shameless plug saying, go to our website and look, because we're always hiring.
Yeah.
And we are a great employer to work for. But we're always hiring, and people aren't necessarily looking at it if they're already working somewhere. We probably hit the job boards for people who are looking for employment, but those who are maybe unsatisfied in their employment, we always are hiring for civilian type positions. We don't necessarily have a whole lot of formal criteria in order to get through the door. There's no degree, you don't have to have a university degree, and we'll work with you and we'll train you if you want to work. And so, but that means 24/7, weekends, nights, all those things. And the dynamics and the challenges of hiring to fill those positions get tougher and tougher every year. And the fact is, there was a time when it was motivation by money and finances, and that so much for the newer generation isn't the motivation out there anymore. It's the motivation of what's in it for me, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it's also a work-life balance. And I'll be the first to admit, my work-life balance was messed up when I was younger, and looking back, one of my things now is to make sure that people who work for me don't have that messed up work-life balance, and we support them to make sure that they're getting that balance right, and trying to do everything we can to recruit individuals to put in those positions. So that's probably the biggest thing.
You mentioned that, well, before I go there, I want to mention too that it's been an awful fall in terms of police services here in this country. We've lost a number of officers in awful situations, and I gather that, as I recall, that a number of officers had a close connection with the situation in South Simcoe, where in Innisfil Township, where two officers lost their life in what appears to be a domestic violence situation. So I'm sure that must be a bit of a wear on you.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever something happens, especially when it's close to home, South Simcoe's not a couple hours away, and you can relate as a frontline officer. You can relate to going to that call for service and really not having anything. And the same way with the individual down in the OPP officer down Caledonia Way and being killed down there. Those are the things that really strike home. And the more we can do to support our members, the better. We have a psychotherapist on staff that comes up and is available to any member who wants to talk to them. But I'm always looking for ideas and possibilities to expand the supports that we can offer. And had great support from the board. Pre-COVID, we ran some one day seminar, brought up guest speakers, and brought in all the services that are out there for individuals who are suffering from occupational stress, and whether that's a massage therapist or it's a yoga instructor or it's riding and working with horses, equine therapy, any of those things. We brought in all those agencies to have a display, like a display board, a fair to promote their services, and then had a guest speaker. That was pre-COVID, and now we're out of COVID. Now it's time we start looking at that again, and that was for all the police and fire in Grey County. So, I mean, those are the types of things that anything we can do to look after our membership and make sure that they're healthy, because if they're not healthy, they're not being able to offer the services they need to the community, and that doesn't make for a healthy community.
Now, you mentioned the dispatch service, civilian employees in the dispatch services. You don't just dispatch Owen Sound or just Owen Sound and EMS, and fire. There's quite a number of municipalities across the province that you now dispatch.
Yeah, so presently we dispatch for 6 police services and 42 fire services throughout Grey, Bruce, Huron, Perth, and then in the east into Port Hope and Cobourg as well. So yeah, our civilian staff, and that's a function that started before I arrived here, and it's an efficiency that all of these smaller police services we dispatch for Hanover, West Grey, and Saugeen Shores in our area that people are familiar with. And if you call 911 in anywhere in Grey or Bruce County, you're going to get a dispatcher working at the Owen Sound Police Service building who answers your call and either keeps it and takes the information if it's for police or fire, or redirects it to ambulance in London, or to another provider if it's a different fire service. But those individuals, that's a revenue generating efficiency for the police service. We don't make money, but it certainly offsets the cost of providing that service to our own community. So between that and our IT branch, that's providing support for other police services and other municipalities and fire services. Those are areas where the work that we do here, yes, we have increased staff and we have a higher number of staff on, but the costs are to offset cost of policing for the community of 22,000 that we police in Owen Sound, because there are enough pressures coming in that increase that on the other side of it, being the regional hub for Grey County and Bruce County, and people coming here to work and from outlying areas in the community, that we take on costs and take on work and assignments. Our call volume is such that we service we have a population of 22,000, but the market survey and our calls would tell you that we're servicing at least 40,000. So that's the type of thing that the dispatch center, great work, great professionals there. And if you want to join that team, like I said, they're always looking, and it's an exciting career, but it's done in an attempt to make it more cost efficient to this community and the citizens of Owen Sound.
Sure. Now, you mentioned that you wanted to discuss some of the changes in the laws that people may not be aware of.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of talk about the decriminalization of controlled substances, and there's been no change on the decriminalization front. There's some initiatives taking place in larger communities and larger cities like Vancouver, and there's been some work on in larger cities like Toronto with controlled substances areas and safe supply and safe supply and safe injection or safe consumption sites. And so there's been a lot of work on that front, but there hasn't been a change to the policy, but there's been to decriminalization, but there has been a change in that's affected the police side of things, in that the Public Prosecution Services of Canada, was the federal Crown prosecutor who looks after federal offenses, which include drug offenses, are no longer prosecuting for straight possession, recognizing that it's an addiction, it's a health issue, it's not a criminal matter, and it's not right to criminalize somebody's health issue. So they've taken direction from their power that they won't prosecute simple possession charges. So it then hampers our ability, because we're not going to be in a position where we can enforce or make an arrest based on a strict possession of a controlled substance, because we know that they're not going to take it forward and prosecute it. So it's abusing our powers if we go and make an arrest based on that. So it has effectively changed how we police and how we can enforce the current laws that are there. And people still see and know and call the police and say there's a person using drugs, and the answer is yes, they probably are using drugs, and that's a health issue, and people have to understand that. And as I said, it's the right direction. It's just maybe not that well known out there in the public, because criminalizing somebody's health issue isn't helping anybody, and it's not going to remove that stigma associated with getting help or even acknowledging that you have a problem if it's still criminal, because there are a lot of people who are working, functioning, and carrying on their life and doing their job while also having an addiction, a substance use problem that they don't want. They're not going to come forward and acknowledge and try and seek out help if it's criminal. So there's a lot more work to be done in that area from a lot of parties and a lot of different levels. Right.
And basically, you are, as police officers, you are kind of at the behest of the Public Prosecution Service, because you're not going to spend your time doing something that will result in nothing.
Well, exactly. And not just the fact that it will result in nothing, but the fact that really, are you abusing your authority? Mm-hmm. you're making an arrest based on something that you know isn't going to result in anything, and and you've been given direction that you're not. Basically, we're not going to proceed with it, so you're abusing your authority by going ahead and using that power of arrest, and then it's going to come down to a civil matter.
Well, let's do a hypothetical here. I hate to do it, but I'll do it. I see someone using drugs on the street or somewhere in my travels, and what's the best response or the appropriate response for me? Just keep on walking?
No, I think it's important that the individual that we know, because I mean the problem, and we haven't even touched on it right now, is the tainted supply of substances out there. So that individual potentially is at risk of death, given the depending on what substance they're using, depending on what's in it, and the concentration. And unfortunately, that's why we're having as many overdose toxicity deaths as we have in our community, and it's tragic. So to walk away and not do anything, and then have that person die on the street corner or in the alley or in their own home or wherever that's taking place, and whether it's in a public place or in a washroom, that's not a great answer either. But similarly, the expectations from the public have to be tempered with the fact that individual is using. Yes, we know that individual is using, but it's not necessarily the same way it was 5 years ago, where now we're going to lay a charge against that individual. We're going to offer them supports. We're going to try and put them in contact with people. If we know who they are, or if we have our mental health team is working, we can try and connect them with services. And that's probably right now our biggest and best role, is to support individuals, make sure that they're healthy, and know that the supports are out there for those people.
And if I could, David, even and this is kind of a new role for us. We have a special constable who's on cells, and when we bring in someone, and they might have been brought in because maybe they were struggling with their mental health and they were doing something illegally, and for their safety, ideally you would take them up to the hospital so they could get the meds. But in some cases, they might end up here, or maybe they have been brought in because they are too intoxicated and we couldn't release them back out into the public. We have, and it sounds kind of simple, but even handing a 211 card and the special constable saying, "Hey, I don't want to see you back here." And that's the truth, and that's something that's kind of new and unique, and that really it's giving them that little bit of a handout to say, yeah, you're here, yeah, it's an awful situation, but you're leaving now, and I really hope that you call this number and try to find the help that you need, because quite frankly, I don't want to see you again, or especially in this environment. And you know what? Every once in a while, we have a breakthrough, and we had one of those earlier this year, which was pretty cool. So I guess that's another area that's certainly unique, and where we are actually doing our best to try to provide as best we can some information or some services to people when they are here.
Yeah, that was a great.
Isn't that the background behind SOS Owen Sound? The at the farmers market, the every 2-week event with EMS and various outreach services?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the whole thing, is that that resulted out of that was maybe one of the best things that came out of the pandemic and some of the restrictions and the lockdowns, was they realized that if you come to the people and treat and meet them where they're at, in order to supply them with what they need and meet their needs, it reduces the risk and the overall harm. And so that's if that's medical support, if that's whatever, mental health support, whatever that might be, those are all the agencies that are participating in the SOS down at the market. That's exactly the whole purpose of it, is to make those connections and to supply and meet those demands and meet those needs, so they don't end up in crisis.
Okay, so that sounds like a real shift in policing from I won't say punishment, from a consequencing perspective to support perspective, and that's a shift. And I'm sure if I were to tell you 20 years ago or 30 years ago, Craig, that this would be where you'd be, you'd probably go, "What?" But it's true.
Absolutely, and I can tell you, I've been involved with integrated drug strategies and sitting on steering committees and chairs probably the last at least 10 years, probably longer than that, in this community and others. And I can tell you that my focus and my direction from my supervisors when I started certainly was nothing at all, and not at all the position we're in now. Everybody realizes the 1980s Ronald Reagan war on drugs that didn't work, isn't going to work. You're not going to police your way out of a problem, of a health issue and a social issue. It's just taken some time, and you know what? Maybe the police weren't the fastest to pick up on it, and maybe we were a little late coming to the table. But certainly, yeah, it's been a huge shift, and the support side of things, and the people that we're recruiting, and the individuals that we're looking for, and the skills that we're looking for have changed over the years as well. And you know, I think you see that in the demographics of the police service. You see that in the really quality people that we're putting out on the road now. That it's not all about enforcement. It's about caring community members, supports, reaching out, the ability to talk, make connections, all of those things. That's what we need. That's our primary role. We still do enforcement, rest assured. And if you have a complaint about somebody speeding in front of your house, we'll get to that one too. But certainly the crisis stuff and dealing with those issues is just as much about making connections and making sure the communities, that's part of community safety and well-being. And we have a small piece in that, but we also have a big piece as a connector for everybody else.
Sure. And Jason, you seem to love your job. You seem to, I sense from you an energy and an enthusiasm. Do you find you're making a difference?
You know what? I certainly like to think so. That's certainly why I got into this role, why I applied for it in the first place. Just if people have asked me if you always wanted to work in police services, and I said no, not even close. So I worked at Georgian College before this in public health, and you know, some other spots as well. But I love this role. I love what I do. I love the education awareness, because you know, safety for all is really important to me. And sometimes people having a better understanding of how they can keep themselves safe is just as important as somebody picking up the phone and calling 911. So sometimes you just don't know that you've actually helped someone, or that you helped them make a positive decision, because we actually don't get that call. But ideally, you'd like to think that you're certainly making some inroads, and doing that is certainly walking the walk and talking. If you're going to talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. So you can't just post stock photos on social media, and say happy Pride. The idea is that you want to be out with the community and show your support. You know, if you're welcome to do so. If the emancipation here, you want to be out and show your support. At Maliquidon, we want our members to be educated, to learn more about Indigenous history, Indigenous culture, because you don't know what you don't know. And so it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight, but I'd like to think that at the very least, I'm making a little bit of change.
I think it's important. Sorry, David, one thing on that. I think it's important to note that our community is very supportive of our police, and we appreciate that, but they're also very aware and very supportive of the community services officer role. And Jason, being a special constable years ago, would have been of a uniform position, but you don't need to have police. But you don't have to have a gun on your hip. That role's changed. It's a community connector. It's a social navigator. And the education piece. There are a lot of other communities that are asking their police to get out of the schools. Our schools are asking for more input, more of Jason, and I think that goes to Jason, and it goes to the skill set that he brings and the background from being on that education side of things as well.
And on that note, we're going to have to say farewell, and thank you, Chief Craig Ambrose and Special Constable Jason Cranny, for joining us on Politically Speaking today. Always a pleasure, and yes, we will talk again. Friends, I'm David Shearman. Take care. All right. Well done. Excellent.
All right. Excellent. Thank you.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
Don't forget to tune in to Great County Life at Home next week. as we meet the new executive director of Safe and Sound.
The One TV free preview is back, and viewers are loving it.